Hello, and welcome to our video review of Hamlet Act 1, Scene 1, and Hamlet Act 1, Scene 2. So, Act 1, Scene 1 gives us the overall plot. And just as you always want to consider the first words of a story, poem, or play in addition to the title, or a song for that matter, they usually clue you into the title. Obviously, the title of this is Hamlet. But the first words of the play are, who's there? Now, when I think of the word who, I think of identity, right? And that's what this play is all about, identity. And I don't want to give anything away, but you'll know what I mean when you finish reading Act 1. So more to come on identity and the theme of identity in the next lecture. But for now, notice how the first word of the play is reflective of the overall purpose and theme. When we get to Macbeth, the first word of Macbeth is when. That plays all about time. When we get to Othello, the first word is tush. The first words are tush, tush. And back then, tush, tush meant come on, right? And essentially, what the character is saying is, you're messing with me, you're lying to me. And that's what that play's all about, is whether or not people are telling the truth, right? So the first words, who's there? Wondering who someone is, identity, and that plays a huge role in Hamlet. And it just goes to show how badass Shakespeare is that the first words of each of these three tragedies clue us in to the purpose beyond the title. Obviously, we know they're about the title characters, hence the title Macbeth, Othello, and Hamlet. So, Act 1, Scene 1, the characters are wondering why they're on watch, right? And again, as you're reading, if you need to look at the right hand side of the page, that's fine. I will never quiz you or test you on Shakespearean quotes. I will only ask you questions about the plot. This isn't a 300 or 400 level Shakespeare class. You're not English majors. That's why we read, well, some of you might be English majors. But again, it's a critical thinking class, and that's why we read the No Fear edition. I don't mind if you look to the right hand side of the page to help you better understand what's going on. I just want you to recognize the plot and what's happening. And then it's my job as your English professor to point out why what's being said and how what's being said is important. So, from a plot standpoint, we learn that they're on watch, right? Why? Because they're afraid that they're going to get attacked by Norway. We learn that Hamlet's father, who was the king of Denmark, when he was alive, right, killed the king of Norway in a battle and took a bunch of land from him. Now that Hamlet's dad is dead, the son of the old king of Norway wants to get that land back. So Denmark is afraid they're going to get attacked. Now remember, these were hand-to-hand combat days. So they're on watch at the castle to see if anybody's coming so they can be ready if they get attacked. Now, Horatio is the one that explains the situation to the guards, Marcellus and Bernardo, because they're unaware of why they're on watch at first. And second, they're unaware of why the ghost of Hamlet's father, the dead king, has appeared before them. Now, remember, Horatio doesn't believe them, right? He's basically saying, come on, I don't believe it, right? If you look on page, well, I'll go act scene line numbers just because not all of you have the paperback book. Page 4, if you have the paperback No Fear edition, but Act 1, Scene 1, line 21, Marcella says, Horatio says 'tis but our fancy and will not let belief take hold of him, touching this dreaded sight twice seen of us. You won't believe him. Now, some of you may say, oh, yeah, when I'm reading this, it's kind of hard to understand. Well, yeah, it was written hundreds of years ago. Think about it this way. If Shakespeare were alive today and he was listening to a hip hop song on the radio, I don't think he'd know what a lot of the words were either. Remember, all the words in Shakespeare are in the English language, and you can look them up in a dictionary if you have any questions, or you can use the right-hand side of the page to better inform yourself of what's going on. Remember, he tries to make things rhyme, and when he writes in like the lines, they're like poems. You can only fit so many words on a line. So a lot of times he rearranges the words because A, they just talk differently back then, right? Tis but our fantasy, right? Horatio says tis but our fantasy. Right? Normally you'd say, oh yeah, Craig says it's a fantasy, not tis but our fantasy. So again, they just spoke differently. Just like again, if Shakespeare were alive today, he probably wouldn't understand a lot of our colloquial expressions and the way that we structure our sentences because it might be unfamiliar to him. But again, they're still English words. You can always look the words up if you don't know what they mean. And sometimes you may have to rearrange the ideas in the sentence to better comprehend what is being said. Now, again, those of you that speak a second language, I usually find that reading Shakespeare is easier than it is for just English speakers that only speak English, because those of you that speak a second language, you're used to moving things around. One of my biggest problems in my Spanish classes was I always wanted to put the adjective before the noun, right? Bonita chica, right? Pretty girl. You wouldn't say that. You sound like a person who's not learned in speaking Spanish. But in English, we'd say, oh, that's a pretty girl. In Spanish, you'd say that's a chica bonita. So again, mix it around. So don't be afraid to mix the words up on the lines if it helps you better understand what's being declared in the sentences. And again, feel free to look to the right-hand side of the page. You will not be tested on the Shakespearean language per se. I will just ask you questions about plot because we want to know why they make the decisions they make. How are the plays tragedies that could have been avoided by using critical thinking skills? So, Horatio, who doesn't believe them, right? Well, again, uh, he kind of freaks out when he sees the ghost and he doesn't know what to make of it. Now, remember, the ghost will not speak to them, but Horatio says it can't be a good thing. And we have this idea of foreshadowing, hints of things to come. If you look on Act 1, Scene 1, line 66, right? On page 8, Horatio says, in what particular thought to work I know not, but in the gross and scope of mine opinion, this bodes some strange eruption to our state. Now, if something's foreboding, it's forewarning in some ways or foreshadowing evil. When you say something bodes, it's a negative thing. This bodes some strange eruption to our state. Now, if you were going to say something's messed up, something's amiss, something's wrong, right? I don't think nowadays you'd say some strange eruption to our state. I think the wording is a little bit archaic, meaning it's something that people said back in Shakespeare's day. But you know what an eruption is, right? And I think when you think of it as a figure of speech, what is he saying? This is going to erupt, right, in the country. Otherwise, what would we say now? This is going to blow up in our face. Something's going to blow up. It's going to blow up, right? So again, even though it's a different word choice, it's definitely clear what he's saying, and it's a beautiful figure of speech. And I like how he introduces the foreshadowing that it's not a good thing that the ghost of the dead king is appearing to them because his spirit is not resting peacefully. And furthermore, we know that for a fact because the ghost is wearing his armor. He's dressed for battle. So the ghost will not speak to them, and Horatio decides, right? I think it'll speak to Hamlet, so let's go tell him, right? And they all agree that they're going to go tell Hamlet that the ghost has appeared. And Horatio says at the end of Act 1, Scene 1, let's do it, I pray, and I this morning know where we shall find him most conveniently. Act 1, Scene 1, the last two lines, lines 174 and 75. It's on page 16 if you have the paperback version, right? And so when Horatio says, let's go find him, right? And Marcellus says, let's do it, I pray, and I this morning know where we shall find him most conveniently. Again, it's pretty clear what they're going to. Now, look at the wording. I this morning know where we shall find him most conveniently. What would we say now? I think it'd be convenient if we go to the castle to find him, or something like that. So again, the words are there. Just kind of think about the general idea as the lines are being presented, and if you kind of have to analyze them a little bit in depth, that's fine. But remember, they are English words, and it's just the context. They spoke differently back then, they arranged their sentences differently, but it's still pretty much the same ideas. What did Shakespeare do often? Use figures of speech. What is he a master in? Using figurative language, using adjectives to describe, using adverbs to explain how things happen. Right? Remember, adjectives describe the noun. What kind of noun? Adjectives answer that question. Craig is an effective teacher. Okay, what kind of teacher, right? The adjective is effective. Um, and then adverbs answer the question how. How is something happening? Um, and usually they end in words like ly. Um, it's slightly raining. How is it raining? Raining slightly, right? So adverbs answer the question how, and they describe verbs, adverbs, and in some cases adjectives. And adjectives answer the question what kind of noun, and they only describe nouns. So as you're reading Shakespeare, pay attention to his use not only just of figurative language, but of adjectives and adverbs, right? How will they find him in the castle? Most conveniently, right? Um, so that being said, I'm going to pause right now and we'll pick up with Act 1, Scene 2 in the next video. And thank you for your patience. And boy, oh boy, do things get crazy in Act 1, Scene 2. Stay tuned.